Hello, and welcome back to How Did They Win, a bonus series from And the Runner-Up Is, where I take a request from a patron to cover an Oscar race of the past, go through the nominees, and discuss why we think the winner won. And I am here today with my favored regular panelists. We all know them by this point, but first off, welcome back to the show, Tom O'Brien.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Kevin.
And Amy Thomasson, welcome back.
Always ready. Always.
Always ready. Yes. So appreciative of both of you, as always, and very appreciative of the patrons who came up with a lot of great suggestions for this, but we couldn't resist collectively tackling this one. We'll be talking about a very juicy category and one of the biggest, perhaps some would say, upsets of the 21st century, 2002 Best Actor, where Adrien Brody won for The Pianist, despite maybe not being considered a frontrunner. So this was requested by my patron, Patrick Rivers. Excellent suggestion, Patrick. So let's just get right into it here. The nominees were Adrien Brody in The Pianist, Nicolas Cage in Adaptation, Michael Caine in The Quiet American, Daniel Day-Lewis in Gangs of New York, and Jack Nicholson in About Schmidt, with Adrien Brody, of course, being the winner. So let's talk first our overall thoughts on this category, looking at all these nominees as a whole. Amy, did you have any observations to start us off with?
What a lineup. The actors are just wonderful and have given us so much in so many different films. The two that I had not seen before this podcast episode was Michael Caine or Adrien Brody. And
wow. Okay.
When we get to it, I will talk about at the time I was 1,000% sure someone else was going to win. And I'm still shocked that they didn't. So I'm very looking forward to hearing your thoughts because I had some differing opinions than I thought I was going to have. So I'm really excited to discuss and hear your opinions.
Yeah. Well, I will just add that I have changed some of my opinions even from first watching a lot of these. So will be interesting to explore there. But Tom, your thoughts on this lineup then and now?
Well, Kevin, this lineup, I'm so happy that we got to this race because this is one of the most interesting ones around. I thought all five were terrific, and we don't always have that when we do How Do They Win?
No, we do not.
and it's also an interesting situation where you have four former Oscar winners and a newbie, and it's the newbie that got the prize. As we can probably get to, at the last minute, really. So, I mean, if there's any How Do They Win that really would want you, really the question's pertinent. How did Adrien Brody win? And that's something looking forward to talking about.
Yes, very, very intrigued to hear our thoughts on that. This is a really, really good lineup. I think my only complaint is that it's a very heavy lineup, not a lot of laughs. Obviously, Adaptation and About Schmidt have some laughs, but they're still pretty dark comedies. So, would have been fun to have like a Richard Gere in Chicago in here, for example, who was also a contender, given some, razzle dazzle here. But, it's a lineup full of heavy hitters. Like Tom said, every single nominee here is now a winner. 3 out of the 5 of them have multiple Oscars. And look, based on what we're hearing about The Brutalist this year, we might even have Adrien Brody joining that list of multiple winners soon. We shall see. But love this lineup. I don't always find the male acting races to be compelling at the Oscars compared to the actress races, but this is one where I kind of wish that I was even paying more attention at the time in 2002 to 2003 when this was happening, because I imagine it would have been such a thrill to kind of follow day to day and having this last minute surprise. So as always, we are going to do this in random order, other than, of course, the winner, who we'll say for last, and I will share my wheel of names for my panelists here. Here we go. Share the screen. Okay, here we go. Spinning the wheel. And also I did a different sound effect for this one, by the way, so.
Michael Caine.
Wow, okay. Michael Caine for The Quiet American is what we'll start with.
I was never brave. There I was, heading north. The fear of losing phone more terrifying than the fear of any bullet.
Michael Caine is someone we've actually talked about, of course, for his win for the Cider House Rules, and how did he win for that? And this is a few years later. This is his 6th Oscar nomination. He is now a 2-time winner by this point for Cider House Rules and Hannah and Her Sisters. But this is his 6th nomination, but his first in Best Actor in nearly 20 years. So it had been a while in this lead category. But Quiet American, it's an adaptation of the book by Graham Greene, which was also adapted for another film in 1958. So Michael Caine stars as Thomas Fowler, a British journalist living and working in Saigon in Vietnam during the French Indochina War, which involved the French versus the native-born communists. So Fowler is in a relationship with a local Vietnamese woman, Phuong, played by Du Thi Hay Yen, despite him being married. And the dynamic becomes complicated with the arrival of an American, Alden Pyle, played by Brendan Fraser, who likes Phuong too. And as Fowler starts to become a little jealous, he also discovers that Pyle is actually involved in a far bigger scheme than he once assumed. So here we go, Michael Caine. Let's go to Tom first on this one. Tom, thoughts on Michael Caine and his performance here?
Well, it's funny. You look at the list, and the other 4 films are still being talked about today. And I think people have forgotten about The Quiet American.
It's gone quiet, you could say.
No, very. But, revisiting it, it's a performance, I think, that only a top flight actor who has had decades of film experience under his belt could do. Because Michael Caine brings all of that history, all of that baggage to this role as a war-weary journalist in Vietnam. And you can tell this guy has seen it all and is just trying to put his blinders on, just thinking, I'm just here to report the facts. But, in Vietnam at that time, it's very difficult to be that objective and to plow your way ahead. It becomes sort of a fascinating tale of a man who's been compromised. You can almost sense the younger version of that character, because we've seen the younger version of Michael Caine in movies. Idealistic, a little bit naughty, go right ahead. And this guy is just trying to get through the day. And if it means having a mistress on the side, if it means turning a blind eye to something, that's how you do it. And there's an interior quality he brings to it. This is not a big flashy performance. It's a performance of quiet moments. Caine is such an intelligent actor that even when he is quiet, you can almost hear the wheels in his head. And his relationship with Fraser, whom I think he sees as a younger version of himself, begins to expand his horizon a little bit when he thought it was closed. And it's almost a story of second chances. It's like, here's an opportunity for you to do something that's not compromised. Do you have the guts to do it? And Caine always keeps you wondering all the way through. And that's what held me to this whole film. It's a quiet performance, but I think it's a beautiful performance.
Mm-hmm. Well said. How about for you, Amy? You mentioned this is your first time seeing this. So what were your thoughts?
It is. I have the book. I've never actually read it. I agree. Michael Caine always delivers. And I love that about him. And he definitely seems at home in this role of a sophisticated British man who is living his life. And I love that line at the beginning about how he's British and he does things at a certain time and he has his tea every day and he reads his newspaper and he has those. I saw it as more of a British view of an American. that there was that division between this is how we do things in England and you are American and this is how you do your things. Plus, a little bit differently because I also looked at it as the way the men both looked at the woman, Fong.
Right.
How she's 20 years old and how he's this older man and he has his wife and how he's such a flawed character under that veneer of, oh, I'm so proper and I'm so British. And I thought that aspect to me is really what I was paying attention to, that he was really not thinking about her. I'll take care of her. I'll take care of her. She is me. She doesn't need you, flashy, young, handsome American man. She doesn't need you. I'll never be able to marry her. True, no Vietnamese man will ever have her, but I have her because I need her. And I love all of her little childlike qualities, that she goes and she's reading magazines and playing with her little school friends. And then at night, she'll listen to the music that I'm teaching her to like. And it's a little gross. And maybe back in the 50s, there was that colonial attitude towards, quote unquote, the exotic.
Right.
And he's a part of that. He's part of that colonialism, not as a Frenchman, but as a British man. And the American who's like, what are you doing, man? Like, you can't ever marry her. She's throwing her life away on you. She might not love me, but I can actually take her home with me and marry her and do what's right for her. And since it's written by Graham Greene, we're kind of supposed to side with the British guy. It's just very, very interesting. And that you have Brendan Fraser, who was amazing in this movie. Where was his nomination? So he's very conflicted. I like that he's a flawed character. I think that Kane played it very, very well. You saw all of those layers, that he admired Pyle. But in the end, did he make the choices he made because of a greater reason or because of those personal issues that he had with Pyle?
Yeah. Or using those grander reasons as an excuse
exactly,
because of his personal feelings.
Exactly. I personally thought it was a little bit of pettiness.
Yeah, for sure. I think so.
And even at the end, when, I don't know if this is a spoiler alert or not, when he's, oh, I'm going to stay here with you. I'm not going back to London. My first thought was, I think he's still lying to her. I think he's still playing. I don't think he's not going to go back to England. I think he's lying to her again. And I like that. I like that the entire movie, you're like, wait a minute, what are his motives here? I'm not really sure. But it's fascinating. And I'd like to, hear everybody else's opinion.
Yeah. Well, I think this is a very good performance. I think the film itself, I'm a little more mixed on compared to the others here, which sort of prevents me from being too excited about it. It feels to me very much like a novel that has been cut down a bit, and some of the interesting nuance and complexity is sort of there, but a little bit of it goes missing in favor of just sort of going through this plot. So I think Michael Caine actually does a lot of the work here to really bring the character to life. I love how he has this very chilling, almost kind of restraint to him, like he's really withholding so much, but still keeping up the facade of being innocent and sort of comfortable, and like he's just a regular, decent man. Now, of course, at the very beginning, it's kind of set up with the whole reveal of Pyle actually being dead and Fowler is questioned. So it's sort of like the Sunset Boulevard classic setup there of, guys murdered. How did that happen? And I think he just maintains this very cool, but also ironically warm tone of voice. And like we have such a positive familiarity, I think, with him as an actor that it is fun to see that sort of, you kind of want to trust him and believe he has good intentions. But the more he peels back, the more you see that there's some pettiness going on here, I think. So it is, I do think a lot of that is just from his performance compared to what the film necessarily is doing. But
well, I think that there is something to that, I think, Kev, because, and also Amy's point about keeping us guessing, because Caine as an actor has been willing to take on a lot of shady roles. And I think that that's some of the baggage that comes with it too. We've seen him play duplicitous characters. And whether we want to or not, I think we can bring some of that doubt in terms of the honesty of his motives at the end, whether he's going to take her back to England or not, in that. And I just think it's a superb blend of actor and role, and that show gives him so much to work with.
Yeah. The scene that I took note of is when he starts to sort of lay out his feelings for Fong in this one scene with Pyle when they're kind of hiding out from the communists at night and explaining like what he thinks she's doing right now while they're out there. And he says, I think rather poignantly actually, that he knows that he's not essential to her, but like if he were to lose her, it would be over for me, basically. Like I would rather die. And so like even though we're very used to these kind of plots and dynamics of the older man cheating on his wife with the younger woman in a foreign country sort of thing, and the angst that comes with that, I think it is a credit to him that, and his very unique charm, I think, as an actor, that makes you not think of it as too much of a cliche.
He really is just a phenomenal actor. I mean, I'm totally stating the obvious. He definitely does, and you could see a younger woman being charmed by him, even in Alfie, where he plays the worst man who ever lived. You can see how he, and someone who's not a devastatingly handsome man, is getting all these women. But it's very charming the way that he's speaking of her. But it's very, again, this is with a 2024 lens, not a 1955 lens, that she's very childlike, and that's what he likes about her. And it's like, okay, let's
examine that. Yeah.
But it's very of its time. That is how men, especially in that time period, viewed women from Asian countries. And it's very accurate. And like I said, it's also very the British version of how a British person would see a young, handsome American man moving in on his territory. That Fraser is charming and very overt with, so are you going to marry her? Because if you're not, I totally will. But if I'm being rude, like, I'll totally back off. And just very brash, and this is what I want. I'm putting it out there, and I'm going to move on it. But as a gentleman, I respect you enough to let you know and not do it behind your back. And how British people would be shocked by that kind of American behavior.
Right. Yeah. Interesting cultural dynamics going on here. Again, that I wish were slightly more explored in more detail. But I think towards the end, like there is, after he is realizing Fraser's kind of connection to the bombings that have started happening that are being falsely blamed on the communists, and he's like processing what to do next and wanting to protect Fong and like get her back, and realizing he might have to do something drastic. Just that look of resolve and almost like regret, I think, is really well done. And you need an actor like Michael Caine to give it that layer of complexity without also making you just hate this man. I think you understand his perspective, and then from Pyle's perspective, it's hard for him to not just still see him as a bit of a trusted sort of confidant, even if all the signs suggest that he is not, in fact, his friend. It's a very tricky balancing act, I think, and just the very righteous sort of indignation that Caine is bringing to that big confrontation scene towards the end is really, really good between him and Pyle, because you're seeing how I think like this personal connection to this young woman is leading him to have a little bit more of an vested interest in what's actually happening in this country and actually want to take action and not just be this impartial sort of observer. And it makes him much more animated, I think, and emotional than we've seen before. And going on this path to having Pyle murdered, especially when he kind of justifies his actions as just being like, this is part of the American way and all that. I think you do understand why he would take such an action, even if you're kind of disgusted by it at the same time. So again, it's a very tricky character we have here.
Both of them, I think, were excellent. And when Pyle was explaining his rationale,
Mm-hmm.
I could kind of see where he was going with it, especially with hindsight of the Vietnam War. You don't know. There are definitely no clear answers because, in some ways, he wasn't entirely wrong with the ideals of what could have possibly happened. Just really interesting.
And I think it's key too that the story takes place in the colonialism times before the Americans get into the war, where it becomes something else entirely. And that attitude of men and women there. I think the film has its eyes wide open, and the characters do too, in the role of what does a poor Vietnamese young woman do? There are hookers and there are taxi dancers, and she is a taxi dancer. And that becomes a class kind of thing with aspirations to potentially greater things. The film creates to my mind, a very not realistic atmosphere, but in a literary way, what the colonialism attitude pervades everything, including relationships between men and women.
Yeah,
I think
agree.
Fong's sister's the real hero of the story. She knew what was what, and she was looking out for her sister, and
That's
was right because it's true. You look at throughout history when countries are kind of being occupied and women are forced to do what they need to do to survive, and then once the occupiers leave, sadly these women are seen as, oh, you were with these other men, we don't want you, and now you have nothing because your protector's gone.
Yeah.
Which is not at all what the movie's about, but
Yeah. It does make me want to read the book, to its credit, to explore this
I read The
a
End
little
of the
further.
Affair. It was interesting. And that Graham Greene is such a hardcore Catholic. You wonder what his thoughts were on Fowler versus his wife, who was like, no, I'm not giving you a divorce. I'm Catholic, y'all.
Well, an interesting movie, like we were kind of saying. It's probably the least seen of this group, but I think worth it just to watch his performance. It makes sense that he was the only one perhaps singled out for it. Thank you for listening to this preview of How Did They Win, a bonus series from And the Runner-Up Is. If you liked what you heard and want to hear more, please go to patreon.com/andtherunnerup is and become a patron. Only $3 a month will get you access to bonus episodes and early access to regular episodes. Thank you so much for your consideration.